All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. People can still come and filter in. So my name is Holly Womack. I am Marketing Director for Cove Consulting. And today we are going to talk about cybersecurity insurance and MFA. And we're joined by Jeff Dooley. He's a Duo security specialist, and Andrew Merica, who's a Duo engineer. So before we get started, I just want to briefly talk about Cove Consulting if you're not already familiar. We were founded in 1993, and on average, we support over 25,000 users daily. So we specialize in a variety of complex IT problems, such as cybersecurity, infrastructure, communication, physical security, student safety. We also offer a variety of services and analytical reporting, such as IT budgeting, IT assessments, and gap analysis for your organization. Throughout the webinar, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them and we will hold a 15-minute Q&A session after the webinar. So I'm going to pass it off to Jeff to give us an introduction on cybersecurity insurance and MFA.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate that introduction. And in fact, the first time I met Pine Cove was at a security event. So just to give you kind of a heads up, we've known them for a little while. I appreciate the chance to talk about something that's very important to us, which is how do we secure our users and protect applications. And when we talk about insurance, I think that's a big topic for a lot of our K-12s today. So you may be nodding your head, yes. I think a lot of you guys are probably in that boat where maybe it's compliance requirements or you just feel like there's a lack in security in your environment today. So we'll kind of walk through what that looks like. I am Jeff Dooley. I am based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and I work with Andrew, who is one of my engineers. So I'll give him a chance to introduce himself as we go through this presentation. But let me get started. So first, I'm going to cover the topic. This is very generic, but what is cybersecurity insurance? So really, this is a very broad term, and you hear this all the time, but it is the contract between an insurer and a company to protect against losses related to something like a ransomware attack, or a lot of times there's a lot of areas to cover there. But what it comes down to is they are being pushed a lot more to make sure that they can cover their users. So as you sign up for a cybersecurity policy, what they're asking you to do is help mitigate their risk. And we're seeing as these attacks increase, and they have been over the last couple of years, the requirements that they have when it comes to underwriting and making sure that you are doing your due diligence to ensure your environment is safe has increased. So they're asking more and more from our school districts and more from our education customers. So I'll kind of walk through what those trends look like, but really they're there just for the just in case. So we talk about car insurance. My car insurance is probably not the same as Andrew's or Holly's. It's different. I've got a different policy. The same thing with insurance. You're going to see different premiums. You're going to see different policies. So picking that one's important, but knowing that most of them are going to require the same types of fundamental things, and we'll walk through some of those questions. So a couple trends. So as we can see, ransomware and insurance, they kind of go hand in hand. So as we see, the market in 2020 was about a $7.8 billion market, and we're expecting it to grow to $20 billion by 2025. And it is because the name of the topic is, it's really about the unknown. And as we are, as we kind of we take our stance on security, we also know that there is someone who is trying to take our data, trying to take information from us. So when we do that, that's where we see this is a big increase year over year, and it's because there's a lot of money to be made in that kind of industry, and so we see that insurance follows that. 59% of all breaches involve small organizations. So we're not talking just the Googles of the world, and we're not talking just about targets. We're talking about really small K-12, small local governments, just really small businesses in general. So that's the majority of the attacks that are happening. And we, of course, are not, we're not always as prepared as some of the larger organizations because we don't have security staff. As far as growing, so breaches grow 60% year over year. And this is also interesting. So when we talk about layers of security, when we look at things like credentials and passwords, those are usually a higher attack vector. So in order for us to get access to applications and certain systems, we of course need to have credentials. And so that's why this 81% is such a huge deal. Last thing is 1 million passwords are stolen every week. And this is an old stat. So imagine this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. So we need to get that updated. But that's interesting because that you look at your credentials, even if you think you're making sure it's a secure password, there's got to be other layers of security there. So, and then when we talk about specifically to districts, so these are some questions that are worth looking at, and these are the ones that kind of get started the conversation with the insurance company. So, one, are your districts and schools valuable targets? And that's why you guys are having those discussions. So yes, that's part of that risk evaluation. What data do you collect? So it's important to consider the applications that you're supporting. So oftentimes you might hear, you know, hey, first of all, let's talk privileged users and certain applications like VPN. And that's usually a part of that risk evaluation. That's the starting point. But just know that that's got to be a question, is what kind of information do you have? The security practices you have in place, and this could be things like phishing campaigns, whatever you do internally in-house to make sure that you're training your end users. So that's part of risk evaluation. And this is generally what liability insurance will cover. So things like data breaches, network damage, ransomware, that's kind of the basics. Of course, they will want that checkbox, which we'll talk about. And then this is after, as is kind of occurs. So if there is an incident, how does cyber liability insurance help? Well, and they notify all the impacted parties. So they'll look at things like your credit. That's more a lot of times on the consumer side, but they will look to see if there's been things posted. They will evaluate and fix security flaws. That's where they go back in and say, where did we miss? You know, what did we do? What can we do differently to make sure that we can prevent this from happening again? And a lot of times, if it's a major breach, they'll hire someone to try to mitigate some of those issues that we have with reputation. So that's something also depends on your insurance policy. Not all of them do that. As far as recover expenses, if you can assign a value amount to the expenses lost, and I understand, you know, we talk about education, sometimes that's slightly different than commercial, but they'll a lot of times try to find and identify the cost to recover. So that's part of what they'd be able to cover. Now, so what's new going into this year? We talked a little about this, but the insurers are tightening their underwriting. So an example, I did a meeting about 2 weeks ago, but they were talking about the insurer, what they were asking for the year before, and what they were willing to give them for the cost of that premium. And what was crazy is if they were to pay the same premium last year as they did this year, they would get about a third of the coverage. So that policy that was worth about $500,000 was worth a fraction of that, but they're still paying the same premium. So that's one thing. Even if they do say, yes, we will go ahead and cover you, know that your premium will go up. I mean, this is insurance. So we see that's tightening up every year, but it especially has in 2022. And this is I think a great slide, because what we're really trying to do is help you be even a little more proactive and identify what areas you need to focus on. So outside of, you know, any big compliance audit that you might have, the insurance companies are going to ask some of these questions. And there's more questions than this. These are the top 5 that we see. And if you look at this, a lot of these top 5 are related to multi-factor authentication. So number 1, do you prefer regular backups? Do you look at offsite locations? So that kind of goes back to your DR strategy. And then these other ones are really focused around doing multi-factor authentication around your email. Again, specific applications like your VPN, those are a big one. And then the training, that's number 3. So how are you training your staff and faculty to make sure that they are prepared? And then again, kind of goes back into things like RDP, so the server administration accounts. Who is getting access to those? How do you lock those down? How do you protect those? And how do you make sure there's a second layer of authentication? So those are a few of them. So At the same time, we understand that insurance is doing a certain amount, but it is still on us. Ultimately, it will always be on us to make sure that we're that first line of defense as K-12s and as education. So imagine each one of your members of your staff, you have a role in really what's going to happen next within your security environment. So making sure that we are proactive. So I'll read this part of this quote, but cyber insurance will not instantly solve all of your cyber security issues and will not prevent a cyber breach attack. So just know that that is just the insurance portion. You still have to drive your car properly. So for that, just in case there is an incident, then you would be protected. So just know that you have to take certain steps in doing that, which kind of goes back to this previous slide. Are we doing some of these basics? Are we making sure that we can, we've got a DR strategy, a backup strategy, that we're doing backups off site, that we are protecting some of these very specific applications with multi-factor authentication. And then I'll just kind of take a step back. So I listen to several podcasts usually in a day, but I was very interested in this one I listened to today, which was more focused around cybersecurity in general. And they were asking, okay, who has the advantage, the attacker or the person that is protecting their fortress, protecting their environment? And a few years ago, I think that was easier to protect your environment. And so ultimately it comes down to who has the advantage, and the advantage doesn't go to us who are actually protecting an environment. The advantage goes to that person because, again, there's a lot of unknowns. We don't always know how we're going to be attacked or solicited. So if you look at on this left-hand side, some of the areas which are really vulnerabilities are vendors that come in, different contractors, old systems that we have in place, even just the hygiene and the nature of our devices. Your test environments, a lot of times they have different standards. And then also when you talk about technical debt, how many of these devices do we need to start refreshing? Are we on the latest and greatest versions of some of these to avoid some of the mismatch of poor patch management? And so from the other side, we talk about more best practices. So we care about multi-factor authentication, so what the devices are doing, the logins, also just access. So controlling a lot of what's happening, patches and updates, making sure those are updated. And then things like email security, make sure there's policies around security in general. So HR best practices, which kind of would lead me to this this term you're going to hear all the time. So zero trust. And it's not just a Cisco term. Zero trust architecture really is this whole concept around making sure that we are locking an environment down. We take the stance which is never trust and always verify, meaning we want to make sure that we ensure that the user is coming from the right place, leveraging the right kind of device, and accessing the correct applications. So these are some internal questions you can ask. Do I trust this person? Is there anything unusual about what's happening? Is this device okay? Is it healthy? Is it my device? Is it the correct device? Should this person have access to this application? And the challenge in a lot of this is, how do you make sure that you can roll out a standard and really keep up with the standard? So if we look at this, I mean, what it comes down to is, if we can do some of these things to help and improve an environment, and really just partner. The whole concept is partnering, just kind of like what Holly was saying. How do we partner with our customers better? So one is partnering around rapid adoption. Also making sure that we can reduce that security, that risk footprint that's out there. So increase our security levels, make sure that we're compliant with where those risks are, and then making sure that we're productive. Sometimes we have this rub between security and networking, or even parts of IT, where we feel like if we're securing something, then we're not going to be as proficient, and our workforce is going to struggle because they don't have the same flexibility. So how do we minimize that while providing security? And at the same time, we know that there's a cost associated with that. So how do we lower the cost of ownership? With that, I'm going to kind of just, I'm going to go through each one of these, but just know that zero trust is a journey. This whole concept of, I want to make sure that I can lock down my environment. We know it doesn't happen. It's not just a single product that will get us there. It's really taking a stance where this is a journey. This is an architecture that requires some effort and some energy, so we can make sure that we're moving towards a zero trust architecture. So, things like confirming user identities, some basics things as we go along, but make sure we can secure all access to all applications. That's ultimately what we're driving. And so from our standpoint at Duo, and where Duo got acquired by Cisco really not too long ago, we really feel it's a great partnership and it's a win because we can move all of our users towards that zero trust architecture, and we can do it in a way that simplifies the experience for the user while it heightens the experience for the admin who are going to be managing those environments. So as we go along, I know this is, I'm taking a few minutes here. Andrew's going to step in here in just a moment, but I do want us to be aware of a couple things. So, as we kind of go through this next portion where we're going to show you more of the details on how it works for MFA and when it comes to zero trust, kind of keep some of these things in mind. So as you think about insurance policies, really it's understanding what they're going to cover, because again, each policy is different. So I call that the kind of discovery phase, discovering what they need. And it's going to follow some of those lists that you saw previously. And then also defining what applications are important in phase one. And there are phases. So it might not just be a phase one or just a one-time rollout. It might be a phase one to maybe a certain group of people to then maybe phase two. So planning that structure out. And then the last thing that's really important here is define what security solutions will do. So if you can find the security solution that will lower that premium and still give you what you need from the insurance company, that's what we're trying to get here today. So I don't know if there will be a survey, but there will be some emails back from Holly, I'm sure, just sending out recording and some other things. And then the other thing that I know Andrew's going to speak more about later is let's prove it out. Let's make sure that MFA can do those things that you need in your environment. So we can talk through that at the end as well. But I will stop there. And Andrew, I would love to turn it over to you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time out here today and listening to Jeff and I talk about cybersecurity, zero trust, and overall just multi-factor authentication. So I'm going to show my screen here and we'll get started. And just to double check, Jeff, can we see my screen here? Yep, I believe so.
I'm navigating out, but I think, Holly, can you see his screen as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Andrew Merica. I am a Duo security solutions engineer, and I live out of Colorado. So with that, I'm going to first start with documentation. I like to give a little bit of a high-level overview here, but then we're going to actually jump to display what the product looks like, talk about authentication methods, and then we'll wrap it up kind of in the back end of the admin panel. But yeah, our documentation is very public. Our mission at Duo is to democratize security, really to distribute it and to teach that security is important today, especially multi-factor authentication. This is a great resource and first start, duo.com/docs. You're going to find a lot of intro docs. You're going to see our 3 tiers. There are different approaches to MFA. Not every enterprise is designed the same. So you'll find that Duo offers flexible tiers for your type of enterprise and applications you're looking to protect. One thing to highlight is that in the Beyond tier, there's a great network diagram, and Duo has network diagrams everywhere. I'm a visual learner, so I like to display these and talk about them. But this is a great depiction of what zero trust is. We are a product of that. It's initially about looking at the credentials, ensuring that that user, of course, has the correct credentials, but also can confirm multi-factor authentication. The second piece to that is ensuring that they're using a correct device, and that device meets the standards or the posture. And what this comes down to is determining trust. So our goal is to really protect the workforce when it comes to users, their identities, and their devices. And then this is kind of the encompassing high tier of Duo. That's our pure zero trust product. And just like Jeff stated, zero trust is a journey. You know, information security is ever growing. Cybersecurity is there's never a perfect solution. So it's always something you're going to grow with. And Duo is designed to be that tool that you use to grow with your security journey. But I'm going to proceed down here. We're constantly innovating. So we have things like passwordless authentication, ways to access remote machines without a VPN, and some other improved security measures. Lots of administrative guidance. We do align with NIST best practices. So if you look up NIST and identity management guidelines, you'll find that it's actually best to separate your multi-factor authentication provider with your identity and access management provider. We are a flexible integrator in the sense where we're not just focused on Cisco products. We are a Cisco company, but we can work with many vendors because we're focused on authentication, protecting that sign-in event, and leveraging the protocols that the network appliances have, things like Radius or LDAP or SAML authentication. We have many integrations with Microsoft as well as Google. We do sit on the security board for Microsoft, so we can work with them. And there's also many flavors of Microsoft. So when it comes into context of protecting a server to a laptop, Duo can align with that specific access scenario. We have a web SDK, which is a great development tool that you'll find vendors actually include into their product. A lot of times it might be just working with a third-party app that has a security button that says, hey, let's put in some API keys with Duo here. SSO, so Duo does have a single sign-on to protect your cloud apps. There's also a great amount of modern types of authentication enabled with that SSO, like passwordless. And also we provide a hosted management portal for devices, and I'll talk about that shortly. The last thing I do want to cover is some unique things. We can cover the Mac OS. We have generic integrations. So if you're searching for something that Duo would like to integrate with and you don't find it, most likely we can still protect it with the mechanism used for authentication, like an API or maybe our SDK, but also the common ones like LDAP, Radius, and SAML here. And then finally, we have ways to protect Linux boxes and SSH sessions, along with integrating APIs. And of course, more guidance. So we are not going to put anything behind a paywall. There's no secret formula or secret documentation for Duo. This is also going to be where you can access the admin panel because we are a SaaS product. So it's kind of a great first start and really a North Star of Duo. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump into the first demonstration. And it's really going to be about a common login experience through a browser. So, I have my laptop here. My name's Lee. I'm going to sign in to my email account. I'm really just going to focus on talking about the concept of how Duo works. Duo is called Duo because we're secondary in line of authentication. I mentioned this earlier, where we're separating identity and access management, so storing your passwords, and MFA. And that's really important here because we're not going to do anything until Microsoft, what we're protecting, is going to confirm our password's correct. And that's essentially MFA, right? We're going to pause the login event, provide an MFA experience, and force the end user to prove not just they know their credentials, but also they have that second factor or multi-factor authentication tool. And with this is displaying the Duo mobile app. So I have a notification. This is representing on an iPhone, but I can use an Android device as well. With that, it's doing a few things. So I'm Lee. I'm coming from Illinois right before lunch and using my email account. Okay, that looks normal. I could quickly approve. But I'm also aware, like, hey, this is a security event. I'm being kind of taught like I need to make truthful decisions. So if I were to get this at an odd hour of the day, and I'm like, I wasn't trying to log into anything, I can also deny access and trigger an incident response report. So this is not just putting preventative measures, but it's also teaching, going back to that term democratizing, right? Educating your end users that they're just a part of your security program and policy as the IT team. I'm gonna go back to the demo. You know, if the mobile app is not your first choice, maybe you wanna go another path, that's perfectly okay. So maybe I wanna go to other options. Duo is also flexible with authentication methods. So the devices you use to commit to FA. If I have a biometric like a Touch ID built into my endpoint, which is extremely common, I could use that like a Touch ID or a security key. We love YubiKey here and also other types of security keys. They work seamlessly with Duo. Also, if you have maybe a tablet or another mobile device that sits on your desk, you could leverage that. And of course, telephony. So receiving text or phone calls, you can also do.
Hey, Andrew,
Finally,
I will
yeah, of
jump
course.
in. I mean, it's we get this question all the time, and I think the question kind of comes down to why are there so many options? I think it's one question, and
Yeah.
and the truth is, I mean, we have to be flexible because some people aren't comfortable using a phone yet, or some people prefer maybe a callback. So we want to make sure that's flexible to any end user that's going to be getting into this. But what you're showing right here is great because this is how it looks from the end user perspective, but also we control it from the admin side. So as an admin administrator, you can decide on the forms of authentication. We really like having a lot of variety when we choose here at Cisco. So we have all different ways of doing that. I know you're going to get into it, but those are two questions that come up a lot. One is why so many options? I think that's one. And the second question that comes up, how can I manage that so I can define the option for my user? So I think this is a great place to go. Thank you.
Yeah, great point, Jeff. Thanks for highlighting that. And I'll touch on, those controls and levers in the back end too at the end of the conversation. But yeah, I want to jump actually to another demo. This is another visual representation of a different type of login experience or access event. The previous one was about the browser. Now this is about protecting a Windows system, and really a big differentiator with Duo is that a lot of IT environments and admins and engineers will come to us for this integration, just because it's very seamless, it's fast, and it also covers a lot of areas of a Windows system login. Right now it's displaying the first initial logon, but it can also extend it to the remote desktop protocol, maybe the console of a hypervisor into a virtual machine, UAC access control, we can stack MFA there. And also if this device has no internet access. So if it's in an air gap network or just you haven't connected it to Wi-Fi yet, you can still protect this machine with multi-factor authentication. But we're still following that same concept where we are awaiting this platform, this device to confirm primary authentication first. That's, once that happens, Duo will step in and provide options. Hey, do you want to use your iPhone or your Android device? Do you want to use the push method or maybe a phone call? Or you could have a passcode box. This passcode box has a lot of uses. I could, put a hardware token code in there that's 6 digits. That's an option. If I have a security key that's configured to one-time passcode, I could place it there as well. If I get a text, I could put that there also. And then finally, something with Duo is like, if your end user is having a rough day, they lost their phone or they can't find it, they can't get into their computer, they can always contact the help desk and say, hey, I need a bypass code. And that would be a kind of a fail-safe option and a backup method. So yeah, this is very usable, and it's not just going to be used for one method. Another piece to this is that in the Duo mobile app, you're going to see, your Duo protected account. But with the Duo push, upon enrolling, you can also add a mobile passcode. And this mobile passcode can be used in the event where your mobile device has no network service or connectivity. You know, you're in the basement of a data center covered with a lot of cement, right? You can't reach out to get a good network signal. You could still use this code, or maybe you're on an airplane. So this is a great backup to have as well. And then finally, the point I'll last make is that Duo is designed to be a central MFA location as well. So consolidating, not where you just administer and control what apps get MFA, but for the app on a mobile device, you can add other third parties there. So if you see a QR code that's really common today on the internet, that's asking to add Google Authenticator or Authy, you can also use Duo to scan that QR code and just kind of control that in one app so you don't have many on your mobile device. Okay, so that was just a quick review and demo of the end user experience. Again, one in a browser and one, you know, on the Windows system. From here, I'm just gonna quickly jump to the back end. You know, I mentioned in duo.com, you'll find the admin login. There's also the free trial button, which will spin one of these tenants up. And with that, we're gonna see a lot of information here. This is obviously a baked Duo tenant, so we can quickly see logs. So this is really handy because Duo is at authentication. So we can pull really valuable telemetry data, like who the user is, what they're accessing, where they're coming from, and at the time. And then this is where it really gets into zero trust. Since we're protecting authentication and pulling this data, we want to maximize its potential use, right? We want to get ahead of the curve of any type of threat and really understand the nature of access in our environment. So we can also do this by telling you with quick snapshots of what is healthy with device insight, telling you about the operating systems of devices that are used for logging in if they're end of life or out of date or up to date. We can inspect, you know, browsers as well and tell you, hey, people are using archaic browsers or browsers that are not common and do not have a security team behind it, as well as plugins. But really what this is doing is giving you the information to make better decisions and really standards. The brain of the operations with Duo, where all the power lies, is in the policy engine. And from here, we can do some really slick things like extending security. That's what Duo is designed to do. Zero trust is an extension of security, where if there is an app that's trying to be accessed and Duo's in front of it, you can quickly add a geofence policy where stating we're only going to trust IP addresses from Canada and the US, but we're going to deny access from any other country that is trying to access this protected app. We can go into also anonymous networks. So if we inspect the IP during a login event that is a proxy or a Tor browser or another VPN intended for malicious use, we can also deny access. You know, you shouldn't be using any of those transport types for common workday stuff. Like that should be, you know, abnormal to see. And then lastly, that's really on the detective functions. Duo also has ways to alleviate MFA. Of course, our goal is to secure and button down login and authentication events, but we also understand, you know, hardening a system is a balance, right? We want to provide a smooth MFA experience, but not continuously. So we have options to remember the browser-based, you know, applications. We can do it for hours or days, so that might help the experience. Also with Windows logon, so you can go to your computer in the morning, log into it once, and then if you leave to go for lunch, you don't have to do MFA again. That's another aspect of it too. But really where this is all coming down to is Duo is going to give you as much information about what we're seeing during that login event. And the powerful thing is it's, you know, it's going to be not just seeing the devices that are managed, but also those unmanaged devices, those BYOD devices, those personal cell phones people use to access their email. There's a lot to talk about with Duo. I'm going to touch on one more thing about really being a powerful security tool, and then I'll talk about next steps. And really that's going to be the trust monitor. So since we're constantly protecting access events, we're going to give you those logs, but we also can provide a little bit of a UEBA tool, a tool that's going to allow you to find atypical events. With Duo, I know we're not considered a SIM, or a monitoring solution. We are a zero trust product for MFA. However, we can still leverage that information and give you really the power to be ahead of the curve and do incident response and really be proactive. With that, you can design risk profiles to say these apps are normal for logins. These groups of users can access these apps, and these are high risk, low risk countries or ranges of IPs. And then we can populate security events, things that are abnormal, something like this. This is a perfect example of geovelocity, where this end user is coming from a restricted location because of the geofence, but their frequent IP is different from the access location. So that is not normal. Our policy engine denied the access, but now we should, really look into that end user and probably do some remediation, update their account, contact them, make sure their computer has been scanned, and also do some other incident response checks. So this is just going to assist and go beyond MFA, and I really wanted to highlight that here. So yeah, the Duo Admin panel is easily accessible. The next steps, what Jeff and I commonly see as steps to take if you're interested in Duo, is just going anywhere at duo.com. You'll see a free trial button. That's going to start 30 days on our middle tier of the Access Edition. You can step down or step up the tier that you would like. And then we're also here. So that's Jeff and I's role, is to assist the trial and really get admins as far along with protecting as many apps as possible. And lastly, I'll cover one more thing, is that we have a great guidance, and there is one thing that I like to display last, and that's the liftoff guide. Not everybody's infrastructure is designed the same, not everybody's risk appetite is designed the same. So it can be kind of maybe hard to get started. So this liftoff guide is a great first step to see and read through, because it does provide a consolidated area for all of our documentation and give you an idea of how to look at Duo and how to deploy it. Success planning, so looking at the administrative overview down to communicating to the end users. How do we let our users know what's coming and their options with multi-factor and security? Again, I just want to thank everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time and listening to our demo, as well as our overview of Zero Trust and Duo Security. So I will pass it back to Holly from here.
Thank you, Andrew and Jeff. I think right now we're just going to open up for any question and answers that anybody has. And I will just share them as they come in.
It's a quiet group today, Holly.
I know. And also, if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to reach out to Pine Cove. You could email us. You can go to our website, chat with us in the bottom right box with any questions you have. We'll also send out this webinar in recorded version so you can rewatch it and maybe stir up some questions then.
Yeah, Holly, I would say it just kind of a few topics that Andrew brought up. So I can I'll send out the links that will be all, I think you're gonna bundle all together, but the Duo documentation page, where you go sign up for that free trial, the liftoff guide. So you'll have all of those. Yep. One thing to consider with the trial too, it is for those 30 days that Andrew had mentioned, but it's a limited number of licenses. And we often see this, there's a lot of effort that gets put into doing a proof of concept. And so for that reason, when the decision gets made, yes, I want to move forward, and if that is the decision, then all those policies that get created during that trial, that POC period, will just get converted over into production. So there's no waste of time. I know how everyone's running like crazy to try to get caught up on things. So that will just get converted over. And then at that point, you can continue to go ahead and install other applications or protect other applications within the environment. So very easy to do from that side.
That's great to know. I know one thing that really caught my eye too was the different varieties you can sign in through the MFA, right? Since you mentioned not everybody has a smartphone, I know that's like a big question Pine Cove is getting. What happens when your employee doesn't use a smartphone, or how will they be able to gain access to needed resources? And I think that's a really special part of duo authentication.
Yeah, and along those lines, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to authenticate, especially within K-12. Hard tokens are also an option that can be purchased through Pine Cove that sync directly with the solution. We see YubiKeys a lot of times, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. So as a, I think Pine Cove's got this covered because of their name, but also what they do. So if you need some consulting help, then we are certainly available to do that. And if there's no other questions, Holly, we can shut it down early today if you want.
We do have one question. What does the MFA look like on a mobile device, accessing an account from a cell phone?
Ooh,
That's a great question.
That is a great question. Yeah, so it's going to open up in an embedded browser. I can display a demo of our passwordless view if you'd like. I can do that quickly.
Sure, I think that would be great.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Holly, just giving me back the screen.
Okay, it's back to you, Andrew.
Thank you. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Looks good.
Excellent. So there is an aspect to Duo that I mentioned which is passwordless authentication. The reason why I'm talking about this is because it does provide a view of a mobile device. But more about passwordless is that we kind of do this today without realizing we do now, especially with banking apps. So if you have a modern mobile device that has Face ID recognition or Touch ID, you can use that with a banking app, and we can extend that access use case to also your cloud apps through Duo SSO. So that's what I'm going to display, a passwordless login to a cloud app, specifically Box. This will also extend into the same view as if you have email on your mobile device, like Google or M365. Essentially, you're going to log in through the browser. So it'll look like this, and then passwordless will kick in so we can just leverage our Face ID here. I hope that helps answer your question, but typically it will look like this, where a browser prompt will open up, the Duo MFA display will show there, and then depending on the auth method you select, you'll kind of walk through that. But thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really smooth. It's definitely familiar with other ways you're signing into like a bank account or credit card account, a variety of other ones. I really like that familiarity, not making it too different for the end user.
Exactly.
Yeah, from our side, we implement this and use this on a daily basis. So, Andrew shared a lot of different things, but our login day, our process starts in the morning when we log in for that first time. And typically we're logged in for the rest of the day, which is nice. The other thing is if we're managing multiple applications, and I know sometimes you've got, Google Authenticator and all these other options, but a lot of times you're looking at different platforms for MFA. And the fact that we can consolidate it all down makes our experience as from the user standpoint much easier at Cisco. So we really look at a single interface that really does all of our multi-factor authentication. So that to me is the advantage. We take usually the path of least resistance usually. So that just makes it much easier for us to control our security posture as a team. So.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Jeff and Andrew. Like I mentioned, we'll send out an email with those few handouts and a recorded version as well.
Ollie, thanks for the time. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you, everybody.